What's up, guys? Wait for my stream to come in. All right, should be live. What's happening? Monday stream, another week here in crypto. As it seems like everyone on Twitter and elsewhere is starting to get more excited, understandably so, with alts starting to finally show signs of life, and people that don't play on BitMEX can actually have some gains. So, scrolling down the watch list and looking at CoinMarketCap, most of the gains are still single digit. Obviously, if you were able to get in a little bit early, like last week or a few days ago, some of the wins are already in the 20% or higher range. And then you have a few of the outliers like WAN and Nano and others already ripping a 2x. So, interesting time. I, myself, and tons of others are trying to figure out whether or not it's a dead cat and whether all profits should be taken or whether it's a scale-out opportunity or what it is. So a lot to cover, and obviously an exciting week as well. What's going on with you guys? Who do we have in here? David, we have up top. Take for that what it's worth. It's always been an interesting indicator. Who else do we have? Stream died for me. All right. I'm back. Who else do we have? Some strangers in here. John O's in here. SureSpa's in here. Tyler, Callahan, SK. Good day. CB, everyone in here. Cool, guys. Obviously, keep the format the same. Want to hit Bitcoin first, following kind of what I was viewing as the most important level, the retest, the 6,600 support, previous resistance turn support, which has worked out so far. Obviously, it's not the best sign still that we're yet to crack 6,800, but things look okay, right? So I want to talk about Bitcoin first. Past that, every single alt setup, whether it's the trade from last week or the early trades, I should say, with CMT and WAN, and then the more recent ideas from the weekend, Loopring, LOOM, Raiden, Dig, the one disappointing setup I obviously want to cover as well. Don't want to just look at the winners. Look at everything. And then anything you guys have questions as well. I mentioned this, I think, early last week or kind of maybe even before that, that the segment that maybe hasn't been as important, which is looking at your guys' charts, or questions you guys have. I think less people have maybe taken advantage of that in the past just because most coins aren't moving. Not less important because it's your charts. Now I'm thinking it's more important because I think more coins are moving and you're probably going to have more questions is all I meant by that. Of maybe a setup you're in, maybe a setup you saw, maybe something that you're looking at certain levels. One quick reminder there, if you are going to ask me a question, I obviously can't give advice. Everyone in here knows that. But what does help me and what's going to help you as well is, let's say you're in a random position. I'm going to pick a random coin. I've never seen this coin before, RBY, right? I imagine it's a shit coin. If you're in RBY, let's see what happens. That chart won't load. Let's say you're in, Quantstamp. It helps me a ton if you're kind of looking at a resistance or looking at a level to add or something like that, right? I obviously want some context. It doesn't help too much if you just want to look at, I don't know, data. I have no idea what you're looking at, and right, it just helps me with some context. So if you do have a question at the end, please give me some context. It will help me, and obviously I can't give advice anyways, but I think looking at certain levels and kind of matching what I'm seeing with what you're seeing is obviously going to provide the most value. All right, let me take a little sip of this tea, and then we'll kick it off, of which I have no cup. All right. Make sure that loaded. All right, cool. Looking at Bitcoin, guys. Looking at Bitcoin, kicking it off, the 6,800 resistance break is obviously what everyone's waiting for, right? Ever since Saturday. One second. Moving my screens today and I can't see. All right, so obviously since Saturday, the most important level, or the level that was kind of crucial for me, I'm going to zoom out and look at a 4-hour, was the 6,600 previous resistance turn support. Obviously, and so far that retest has been nice. I got to add to September and December longs. Those positions are up at least $100 still. But right? The one kind of concerning thing, and the one thing that tons are looking at today, is we're yet to breach kind of this 6,600 level. And, you know, tons of people have made charts, I think, on Twitter talking about stops of shorts have been run. So that's kind of ready for our next move down, whatever it is. To me, you know, everything is still fine. I'm still bullish, just like I kind of laid out in the rules of this was the range. Once 6,600 broke, I would be bullish, especially after a retest. So I don't want to be too caught up in kind of the intraday noise. Obviously, it would be nice if we could actually break through the 600 resistance, 6,800 resistance. But for now, as long as this retest level holds, I'm quite, you know, to me, it's still bullish on Bitcoin. It looks like we've broken up out of this accumulation, you know, question mark distribution, this range. So for me, it's still quite bullish as long as we hang above 6,600, right? I'm not too worried about some impending scenario where we kind of rip back down to 6,200 or something like that, right? So 6,600 to me is still the most important support. It's the immediate support, and immediate resistance past 6,800 is going to be pretty much where this last swing high was that we got up to when BitMEX was down. And that's just a fib level as well as previous support. That's going to be pretty much 6,800, 6,900, right? So for now, the range to me is identified as 6,600 as support. And then up here we have kind of the 6,800 as resistance, right? Kind of in a no trade zone for me. I don't want to do too much speculating. I don't want to do too much trying to guess what's going to happen. It's literally right in the range for me. I don't really think it's an attractive level for a long. I also don't really want to be net short here either, right? So for me, pretty indecisive on Bitcoin. Retest played out nice. If you want to be very conservative, you know, you can move up stops, kind of lock in profits if you did add when I added on Saturday. If not, you can kind of let it roll. And I just don't really think any trade right now on Bitcoin is too attractive. For people that are looking at smaller time frames, I saw tons kind of looking at what people kind of refer to, some diagonals, as a meme line, right? They were kind of pointing out, let's say this is the ascending triangle they were looking at, right? Or something like that. You know, I just really don't look at too small of time frames for Bitcoin. As trading gets a lot more competitive there, I think it's starting to trade a lot more like an FX pair. I'm more focused on the 4 hour and the daily, and for now it's kind of right in mid-range, right? So I don't have too many thoughts on it. This is the level that excites me. This is the level that, level that excites me. Before that, no real thoughts, right? So that's what I'm seeing with Bitcoin. The one thing that I am noting macro-wise and with alts in terms of Bitcoin is, as Bitcoin has moved up, kind of regardless, even with the dumps, as long as we're above 6,600 and above this eternal range we traded in, so far that's been very bullish for alts, and that trend is continuing, I think, through the day. So that's a nice sign for me, right? I think some of the alt momentum will die if we do break back below 6,600, so definitely something to keep in mind regardless of whether or not you're trading Bitcoin. Bitcoin is very important for the state of alts. So I want to bring that up. Moving on from that, we have a ton to cover in terms of alts, obviously, right? So I'll go kind of chronologically from the first ideas we looked at, going back to WAN, which was a nice trade, but I wasn't active enough in kind of calling for the re-entry. So let's look at WAN. And then I'll just go down the list. I think there's like 5 trades I kind of want to cover. Most have hit targets. Some are kind of inching up towards their targets. All right, so WAN, this one's a little bit frustrating, slightly frustrating to me. Obviously a profitable trade, right? But let's kind of walk through how this thing progressed. So 2 weeks ago, that was August 17th, right? Well before alts had started moving. The first setup here for WAN chain that I wanted to cover was a break of this really kind of ugly A&E pattern that we're seeing a lot of alts have. This is what LOOM had yesterday. And we had a break of this level, and I was targeting a really quick 20% play to that first resistance, right? I called pretty much a dead cat on all the alts. I expected they would continue to move down, and they did, right? WAN moved down another, pretty much retraced its whole move back down to 15% before absolutely taking off, right? And you see it once again after it breaks the next layer of resistance, which was the target for the original trade. We have a move up, we have a retest of that previous resistance as support, and then we take off. Right, so I was not diligent in kind of calling for a re-entry here in WAN, right? Only got the call to secure 20% profits, but if I could have called again, would have had another 50%, right? I'm never going to be able to, time it all, catch them all, but that one is a little bit frustrating to see. Regardless, I'm not sure I like entering WAN now that it actually has risen, 70%. I think there are better plays to catch, and those are kind of the ones I want to focus on. Past that, the other early idea, which I admittedly was early on, but now it's working out because I think a lot of people are going to be late on, is request. Very, very, very similar to WAN, which you're probably going to see. A lot of them are having kind of this ugly A and E. So it looks like a V, kind of a really shortened E, I guess you could say. Regardless, the bid zone for request, was all in this zone, right? Originally, the idea we looked at, we were right in here, the 650 range, wanted to add below the yellow. As long as it hold green, that was a profitable trade or a valid setup for me. So even if you're taking kind of from the highest bids, up about 15%, and I think this one's going to continue on the daily. It looks really nice. If you stacked your bids or had any bids in the ad zone, up about 20% now. So nothing really to do for request, kind of just a time to sit back and admire the move and really wait for Bitcoin and for the rest of the market to kind of dictate if alts continue to move up or if they don't. Looking at levels, and I think one of the most important things past just entries, obviously when alts are moving up, you can move into most alts and get small 5-10% gains. One of the most important things is, I think, trade management and understanding when you should maybe take some off the table and whether that means moving it back into Bitcoin, whether that means moving it into another alt, whether it means moving it to cash. That's going to be kind of specific to your strategy, but identifying kind of where I expect major selling. I'm going to be looking kind of in the 730, 740 range, just based off previous swing highs. And then this target, 900 sats, which is a lot farther off, and would be pretty much a 40-50% move, right? That's going to be up there, and that's just based off previous swing highs as well. And so no reason to get in the way of this. The same way when alts are moving down, I didn't want to call an entry sometimes for 2 or 3 weeks. I don't want to get in the way of that, right? I try to position myself, which way is the momentum going, which way, I want to capture the biggest trend and do pretty much the least amount of work. And I don't say that because I don't want to work a lot. I'm here, 15, 12 hours a day. I say that because what can I do to kind of not get in the way of the trend, but also reduce risk? To me, that means taking off at kind of major levels, and that's the first level that I would want to take off at, right? So 740 and 900 sats, that's another win there. A little bit early, but kind of glad I was a little bit early on one of these or 2 of these because it gives you a sense or a different feel than maybe adding on plays like the more recent ads. All right, third setup I want to cover is Raiden. Raiden was slightly later. We'll hit dig last. Raiden setup, almost identical to loop ring. Right, so let me move this aside. The first target, which we're hitting and selling off on, is that 15% move. Very similar to loop ring and pretty much all these. You see the A&E, and we were about right here yesterday when I wanted to call this or kind of look at this, and I first saw kind of the volume spike starting to kick in. Obviously that looks small, but relative to request, it's actually pretty good. So once I see volume kicking in, I see about 3/4 of this A&E forming, right? And you don't need to know that this is an A&E. You can just understand this is kind of a regular reversal, double bottom, whatever it is, simple resistance. I don't care what tools you use, but the hint for me was that volume started to kick in, about 3/4 through it, expecting short-term momentum to continue, and picking that first target based off previous swing highs. Right there. That's kind of that's kind of the first level I'd fade, which we just hit, and that's about 15%. Right, so on the 4-hour, we are selling off there. Depending on if you have another setup, depending on if you want to reduce risk and move to Bitcoin, depending on if you want to move to cash, taking off, especially in a bear market where we haven't fully confirmed that all this momentum is going to continue, taking off at kind of the first key levels is fine. It also gives you the confidence, kind of what's the word I'm looking for? gives you the confidence, can kind of give you that conviction to hold on to coins for kind of the later runs, for the bigger profits. If you can snag, people have different strategies. Sometimes it's taking off the initial, sometimes it's just taking out profits, sometimes it's taking out 50% each kind of your targets. Whatever it is, taking some off at each resistance not only trains you, even if it's a small percent, 10% of the play, it kind of trains you to do that and not get caught into a situation where we have a bounce like a few weeks ago when we looked at WAN or whatever it is, and you see the 20% pop or the 40% pop, and then it all runs against you, and 2 weeks later you say, wow, I had an opportunity to snag 4 wins. I have nothing to show for. So whatever it is that you're taking off, I'm going to keep identifying kind of the major levels. So pinging that first major level. Obviously, this trade doesn't become a serious win or kind of a worthwhile win, in my opinion, unless we can actually clear this first resistance, which Loom and WAN and tons of other coins have done, and actually reach kind of the next major resistance based off previous support, turning resistance. That's going to be a 50% play, right? That's what I'm looking at for. But 15%, like I just updated in the group, where's it at? Like I just updated in here. Right, it's having, and that's when we're above it, having kind of the discipline and just kind of the plan to have some sell limits right at those resistances, whether it's the resistance I like or whether it's the resistance you like. I don't care if you're using RSI or what it is. It can help you to kind of sell whatever it is at that first target. And then if you have a pullback, right, so this is a 15% win already. Now, if you have a pullback and it becomes an 8% win, it helps you to sell some kind of at the maximum point. If it continues, great. But if it pulls back, you didn't sell at an 8% win. At least you got your 15 or 20% win, right? So first level there for Raiden. Hopefully you're picking up what I'm putting down there. What else do we have here, guys? There was a few other ones that I wanted to cover. We'll cover Nano. This is one that I'm also kicking myself about because I didn't catch it. Obviously, we had the plan, kind of my look from the group on Saturday was to wait for a daily close above this level. After that, ride it until the next fib level. Totally missed it. I was up early Saturday morning and I just didn't check this and it kept running. So didn't pull the trigger there. Completely missed this one. For people that got into early on Nano, already a 2 or 3x. So that would have been a killer trade. But something I missed and something I'm not really interested in until it gets back to like 37,000. Right, so no updates there for Nano, no trade for me. Request. What do we got here with request? Request, oh, we already did that. That was kind of the first one. Loop ring. All right, this was the other one from yesterday. So there's 2 real kind of setups or 2 patterns that I think are really interesting in the alt market right now, right? And those are ideas that look like WAN chain. So I guess I'll explain WAN chain first, kind of already did. The first idea or setup that I think is really interesting is like WAN chain, right? And these are coins that have already kind of completed this, you can call it an A&E, you can call it a really ugly double bottom, right? And that have broken out of this first resistance here, and then get the volume pop once they break out of that first resistance, right? That's kind of the first, set or guideline or whatever you want to call it, framework for alt trades right now that I think are profitable, that I think are high probability, that I think are good setups in this potential reversal, right? Looking at that first resistance break, the second one is the one that's slightly higher risk, right? But if you can be early, if you can time it, and if you can look at a few hints like volume like we did yesterday, there's potentially higher reward. And also, you're probably not buying something that's jumped as much, right? So looking at loop ring, where were we at? That was Loom. Loop ring was like 1683 sats, right? So looking at this when I kind of caught it, get this guy out of the way. Right, very, very similar to Raiden, which I just went over. Already forming that potential A&E, if you want to call it that, or you could really kind of view it as really just kind of an ugly double bottom. right? Obviously hasn't completed the second bottom. And all I mean by that, I'm not even calling it, definitively the bottom of wherever it can go, just saying kind of the bottom of this window, chance to swing alts, right? It hasn't completed what WAN and what other coins have done where they've already broken this first resistance and moved up, but it had kind of rounded the corner and volume had started to step in, right? So once I saw that 1 hour or 4 hour period where volume stepped in, for me, that was enough of a sign that it could continue. And what do you know? We have a 15 or 20% play already today, right? First level, very, very similar to Raiden or to, I think it was Raiden that I covered earlier. The first level that I would actually take off, just kind of expecting selling, right? Obviously, it's not, too much of a worthwhile trade unless it kind of continues and gives you that 50% play. But if you do want to reduce risk, if you were to be selling early, the first level that I want to do it is based off kind of these previous swing highs here. Right? And that play would make it around a 20-25% win. Right? So over halfway there, 15%, it's nice to see the volume continue to kick in. It's just one of those things where if you notice that in another coin, this can be applied so many other places. Volume is one of the few things that can almost be predictive a little bit. Most things are lagging in technical analysis. Volume can kind of help you catch that hint beforehand, right? Especially in alts where it's really hard to hide. So another nice one with loop ring, not at first target yet, but kind of really illustrates that second kind of setup I wanted to show. All right. What do we have? What else do we got? Loop ring. CMT is the last one. So I just literally covered this one and tweeted it. Same time. What do we got? CMT. So covering kind of the trade, this was before actually WAN and request. This is probably the earliest one. And this one was slightly different, right? And I didn't really even find out why it moved until after someone tweeted on my tweet. But almost the exact same thing. And I was just looking for, with WAN for all these, pretty much for the past month, always looking for double bottoms and waiting for either capitulation, waiting for it to kind of see a climax of selling and whether or not volume was going to hint there, or for some of these bottoms or these double bottoms, watching to see where volume would kick in, right? So someone yesterday or last week, whenever we first traded CMT, I think it was around here, right? Someone wasn't hiding very well, and I kind of get that volume spike, just active and looking for coins, looking for some trades. I noticed we were at previous resistance. Someone kept buying. That gave me a hint. Luckily, able to get it around that 1400 sat area, and then it rips up for a 20% play. Find out it got added to new exchange. That's why. Obviously, I want to get out then. Right now, CMT is kind of back at that previous resistance here, which was a swing high resistance. Right, and now expecting that level to turn and be support. The nice thing is, if you don't know where I got these fibs from, swing low, up to the swing high, once my computer loads. 61% pullback, right? Obviously these fibs, can't talk today, are areas of possible retracement before moving up, right? So getting off the 61% fib, obviously kind of that coinciding with this level also being a previous resistance turn support. That's a nice sign for me. The third factor here is not only a nice confluence of those support levels, but also it's one of the only coins that has been pulling back for the past few days. Right, and CMT, we've traded this one a few times before. Obviously back here in July or whenever it was, didn't work out. Had to take that 5 or 6 or whatever it was % loss in all trade updates. But this is a coin. This is a coin that's been able to seriously steal some volume, whether or not it's a volumizer on Binance or whatever it is. Been able to attract some serious volume and also go on some major runs kind of after these double bottoms. I've highlighted this fractal a few times. Right, so I like that pullback. We'll see if it can continue it. It's tough after a coin gets added to a new exchange, see if it can continue that momentum. But technically, I think that's a really clean entry in one of the few coins that's pulled back. All right, so I wanted to find one more coin today that wasn't maybe a momentum play, that you weren't buying into momentum, that you could actually buy the red candles. And this was it. So that's what I'm looking at in terms of new entries. The last coin, thank you Coin Signals for setting this up. The last coin I want to look at is Dig, right? And this has been really the only disappointing setup, but pretty disappointing, I must say, in terms of coins I wanted to trade. Obviously, I gave you guys the background on Dig. Just another coin to me. There's a few personalities on Twitter that absolutely love this coin. I don't really care. But technically, it was it had been creating this range and getting all this noise out of here. This range of pretty much 110,000 sats up to 120,000 sats, I would call really nice support. Every single time we touch it, we're getting a nice reaction. Up to about 200,000 sats is where things tend to sell off. I liked the range, but it doesn't look like it's holding. And quite honestly, it seems like this is a coin that just continues to promise so much and continues to flop every single news event. So really, I'm okay with letting it run against me until around 100,000 sats. That's below this previous swing low. If it gets down there, I'll take the 10 or 15 or whatever it is percent loss. But still, risk reward wise for the range, I like it. If they can finally follow through or get added to any other exchange, I think it'll do well. The other point with this was entering it, and this was early, if you guys remember, was since it was only on one exchange, some smaller caps, and this isn't even really a smaller cap in terms of the volume it attracts, but some coins like this that are isolated on one exchange, if Bitcoin was doing bad and ETH and most coins were doing bad when we moved in, it usually doesn't have as much downside capture as some of the other coins do. So now that most coins are moving up, it's kind of a double whammy in the sense that it's also not correlated, so it's also not kind of rising up with a lot of those coins, and technically it's also not rising. So that one's a little bit frustrating, a little bit brutal, but it was just kind of a technical play, a range that I liked, and I'll take it really until that swing low is broken. So that's Dig there. Yeah. What else do we have? Do we have any new coins? That's really it, guys. The only other play, which is a bit confusing, and we talked about this, wrong setup, a bit confusing to me is ETH. And the majors, and I see your question there, Sugar Spot. I'm going to try to answer it. The majors, while most other alts have turned around, majors are still in kind of a weird spot where we're seeing coins in mid caps that are turning around or are rounding that corner. What I talked about with Loopring and with Raiden and some other ones, we are seeing coins that turn around, but they already, ETH and ADA and a couple other ones are looking kind of ugly in the sense that they were kind of printed a pattern similar to this, where they held their swing lows, rounded the corner, and are able to move up. ETH and tons of other coins have kind of already sold through their swing lows and quite honestly are not inspiring too much confidence, right? So I'm a little bit worried that, usually this decoupling, and I'm not talking about from Bitcoin, the decoupling within alts of majors going one way and mid caps and others going the other way can only last for a little bit. And then they kind of catch up. So that's a little bit concerning. Maybe they can round the corner. Maybe they can turn around. Trex is doing okay. Tron's doing okay. So we'll see if it can turn around. But that's kind of what I'm seeing with the majors right now, Sugar Spot. It doesn't look good. We'll see if volume can kick in. I'm not interested really in a trade yet on them. And honestly, it's something that I'm more watching and maybe a little bit concerned about. CB, really good question. The last one I wanted to look at, wanted to give you guys, CB said, want to cover another coin that's identical to Raiden and LRC, hasn't moved 15-20% yet. Which was I referring to? That one was Lend. So if I'm looking at, let's pull up, it's the best way to do it would be a side-by-side. Right? Nav also doing it, but that's not the one I wanted to look at. So let's look at LRC. And get rid of lines from a really long time ago. Right, so LRC rounding that corner, able to get in here and kind of start to ride up that momentum. Exact same thing here forming for Lend, in that it's starting to form that second bottom. I can show another example here with Raiden, right? This one's a little bit further along, right? It has kind of that first bottom, second bottom's a little more rounded. There's the eve and the A and E, right? Able to jump in early, already catch that 15 or 20% swing. In my opinion, Lend is kind of forming a situation where for Raiden and LRC, we're able to enter here on kind of that 3/4 through the turn. Lend is kind of offering that opportunity where if I'm looking at where tons of coins are hitting, let's call this the swing high where Raiden just hit and is obviously seeing its first selling pressure. Let's look across previous support here, turned resistance here. Kind of if that's where I'm aiming or looking at, I guess really that only gives me another 10%. I think earlier I thought it would give me 20%. So it hasn't moved the 15, 20% yet. First level, I think it's very similar to, it looks like it's kind of already moving. If someone's buying this live while I'm talking about it, I haven't even bought yet. That's kind of very similar to Raiden here. Gives you kind of that 15% easy to kind of the first resistance, and whether or not it breaks through and becomes a really nice trade or kind of a typical alt trade of 50% or more, either way, that immediate resistance is kind of still 15, 20% off, and still hasn't formed kind of that second bottom, aka slightly more risk. Obviously, you're jumping the gun a little bit and you're not having to buy something, a situation like Loom, where I only kind of caught it once it was at that first resistance, right? Instead of back here. And if it breaks that first resistance, like I said, all of a sudden then this Raiden play turns into a 50% play or a 60% play. So same thing with Lend. If it can break that first resistance, like tons of coins are showing us they can, then it turns into a nice play, right? So I think something like Lend, something like Raiden, something like Loop Ring, obviously they're a little bit lower probability, but it's letting you jump the gun earlier and catch that first 15, 20% until the first level. If they break that first level, like we saw with Loom, WAN, everything else, then you can snag another 50%, right? But it's one of those ones that are early. It's one of the only ones, one of the only ones I'm seeing on Binance that attracts at least, I was going to say respectable volume. I actually still wouldn't even call that too respectable. Not even 1 million in volume. It's kind of why I liked Raiden and Loop Ring and everything else more, and CMT more, attracting at least a few million in volume. That's pretty weak volume, but most coins, honestly, if you look back, this thing has had a market cap of 200 million. Right, and 24-hour volume of 55 million. Right, so obviously volume is denominated in terms of the Bitcoin and that price. So if Bitcoin's price is higher, it's going to be higher. But still, that's pretty weak volume. But it's just one of those ones where, to me, it's identical to Raiden, it's identical to Loop Ring, and it's kind of giving that opportunity to snag a quicker 15, 20% on a coin that hasn't moved yet. Right, obviously slightly less liquid, so not as attractive to me as something like CMT or everything else. I like the more liquid coins. CMT though, I think I covered that. That's it, guys. I had a ton there. Sorry if I talked fast, if I ripped through it. If I did, you can always pause, rewind, go back. But that's a hell of a stream. What do we got? David said, would you consider adding to your Tomo position? Honestly, David, no. I'm kind of stuck in that, and not stuck in a bad way, right? I treat it like an ICO. I think it's, if you look at the team and quite on it, they're already on a few exchanges, KuCoin, what else? Who knows? Maybe once they get their mainnet live, they'll be on bigger exchanges, but I don't want to add to that. It's kind of a position that's, I've really realized that this bear market is, if you have, kind of a meaningful position in some of these coins that don't have enough volume, you get into a situation where it's like you're kind of stuck. Even if I wanted to sell, I can't really. So I don't really want to add to that. I do still have conviction in it long term. I'm treating it like an ICO though. Right? I think it's a small enough cap where I think it can do very well. I think it can do multiples, but for me personally, no, I'm not going to add to it. Market-wide rise, coins like that can do very well, smaller caps. Right now, I'm still seeing kind of the mid caps attract most of the volume. It seems like volume and trends kind of usually go down a ladder. Sometimes it's large caps first, sometimes it's mid caps next, and then it's kind of the junk. Right now, in a weird way, we're seeing large caps lag and mid caps do really well. And I'm not too interested in small caps yet, because obviously I want to be, if I'm in something, I want to be in something that's way more liquid, as opposed to being in something that's less liquid. SK said, Jorge, hopefully that makes sense. No, you didn't miss it, man. Do you look at volume or fundamentals first when trying to spot new apps? Honestly, SK, I just have a watch list of everything on Binance and Bittrex. I have a number of coins that I look at that I kind of always refer to, just based off how they've traded in previous cycles. I'm usually looking at coins that I can actually move into first, right? A lot less small caps. But, if it's mostly charts, right? And then if I notice small things like that pattern, like I said, I kind of have those two patterns I'm looking at, then maybe I'll apply that pattern, whether it's something like LOOM or whether it's something like, what was that, a loop ring, right? I see a pattern that's working. I just want to kind of scroll through and I say, what else is showing that pattern, right? What else is showing that pattern's liquid enough where I can move in and it's not a risk to move out? And then fundamentally as well, it's also not junk, right? Most are still shit coins. I'm not going to debate that, but is it at least respectable? Right? So typically not SK. I would say fundamentals, but it's like most of these, and when I'm talking about these setups, especially in the Trading Ideas channel, it's almost all I go into it very objectively and say this is a trade for me. This is not something I'm investing in, right? And that kind of also helps me separate and say when it hits resistance, I'm taking profit, right? For me, that's more Bitcoin. In long run, I think the trading portfolio, all it needs to do is accumulate more Bitcoin. Right. Cool. Yeah, guys, that's all I got. We're at 35 minutes. I'm losing my voice. So have a good rest of your day. If you're watching this on Monday, have a good Tuesday. If you're watching it tomorrow, it's been really nice still having a nice hit rate when things were going down, especially when things are picking up early on a few of these. But now that everything's moving, the one thing I want to say is don't be, and I kind of only looked at that one new ad today, don't be too caught up in everything moving or everything doing good. It's very easy to do, especially if you're on Twitter or there's some guy showing every win and people start getting fired up and you start looking at your portfolio. Move slow, guys. There's going to be tons of opportunities when Bitcoin makes a rip up or all of a sudden it dumps down here and we move back to 65, right? There's always going to be opportunities to add on dips. Focus on capturing most of the bigger trend and we'll do fine. Right, so I'm still kind of more focused on whether or not ETH and majors bring the other alts down. I'm a lot more focused on the downside. So while everyone's getting excited, do your best, as I am. Obviously, no one's going to be perfect with it. I'm not perfect with it. Do your best to kind of stay in your own goals, stay within your own kind of risk metrics, and not be jumping into everything. Whatever it is that you do best in. I do best when I'm only in 1 to 5 coins, following those few setups. Some people do really good spreading out between 20. Play your game and don't get too caught up in everyone getting excited, especially on a day like today, or especially if this continues a week like today. That's all I got. So, what's up, K-Mall? Yeah, we're still here 40 minutes later. Been a long stream. I'm signing off though. Sorry to leave right when you joined, but I'm off. I'm losing my voice. I don't know why, but I am. So I'm out of here, guys. Take it easy. Have a good rest of your day. Should have a good week. Let's stay objective, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.